In this demo, we'll look at managing instances in IBM Bluemix of 3 database services available in Bluemix. We'll look at managing instances of the Cloud and NoSQL database. Then we'll look at managing instances of the DB database, which is optimized for analytic queries and based on DB2 with Blue acceleration. And then finally, we'll look at managing instances of the SQL database, which is a database as a service based on DB2. So let's get started by logging into Bluemix. We'll start by creating an instance of the Cloud and NoSQL database service. And this is in the data management category. Let's create an instance of it. We'll just leave it unbound. This means it's not being bound to a particular application, but we'll be able to look at the management tools without binding it to a particular application. Once the instance is created, we can go ahead and launch the dashboard, which we'll use to manage it. So first we'll create a new database by clicking on Add New Database, and we'll give it a name. Oops. So now I want to create a new document. So I'll expand all documents and select New Doc. As you can see, it's already generated a system unique ID for me, but in this case I want to use my own ID. So I'll delete what's there and add in my document with my own ID and a couple of fields. Now if we go back here, we can see when all documents is selected, I have a summary of all my documents on the right. In this case, we only have one document, so we only see one. If I had multiple documents, then they would appear here, and I would have the ability to scroll through them. But again, this is just a summary of these documents. In order to edit the entire document with all the fields, I can click the pencil icon, and that allows me to edit the documents. What I'll do is I'll add another field to it. That looks good. Let's go ahead and save it. Now, another operation that's fairly useful in the console, besides adding and updating documents, is the ability to clone a document. So if I go back into the edit mode of my document, you can see that I have a clone document button. When I do this, it will generate a new ID for the clone, but in my case, again, I want to create my own. So I'll give it a unique ID, and I'll hit clone. Now when I go back to my all documents view, you can see that I have my second document there. Now let's look at how to use the dashboard to get a list of all the documents, including the document contents. As you can see here, the all documents view, I get a summary of the document, I get the revision, I get the ID, but I do not get all the fields in the document. Well, this is very easy to do using the query options. So if I click on query options and specify include docs, and then I run the query, this will give me all the documents in the database as well as their entire contents. And as you can see here, I have my 2 documents, and now I have all the fields, the ID, the rev, and then all the fields that I defined. So hopefully this gives you a good intro to the use of the Cloudant dashboard. This is built on top of the Cloudant API, so it can pretty much do anything you can do with the Cloudant API. You can go to the developer section at cloudant.com and see a lot more information about using the dashboard for doing more advanced topics. Now let's take a look at managing DashDB from inside Bluemix. So first we have to create an instance of DashDB. So we'll go back to Bluemix inside our catalog. And DashDB is listed in the Big Data section. And like with Cloudant, we can leave it unbound because we just want to show you the management console. Let's launch the console. And once it comes up, you can see all the capabilities in the navigation area on the left. Also some buttons in the middle that allow you to go to different areas of the console as well. So let's start by going to our tables. And we're going to create a new table. So we'll click on Add Table. Hit Run DDL, and that ran successfully. We used this very simple default table definition that the wizard provided for us. Typically, we would have our own table definition. Also note that you can import the table definition from external files. So now that the table is created, we can actually take a look at it. If we select our default schema, there is the table I just created. And as you can see, there is a table definition down here that has the column names and the types and so on. But DashDB also comes with some sample data that can be used for reporting. It is data from a fictional company called the Great Outdoors Company. In this particular schema, Go Sales, there is data about the sales force and their results. So the branch table here gives us information about the various sales branches around the world. And again, here are the column definitions, but we can also browse the data in the table itself. So if we click on Browse Data, you can see that it lists all the rows. If you need to get a close-up of each row, I can double click on it and I will get a single panel that has all the data for just that row. So now let's take a look at running SQL. So we'll go over to Run SQL. And as you can see, it's pre-filled with some queries around the sample data from the Great Outdoors Company. So let's just go ahead and run that query. So we click on Run, and it runs. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, you can see the actual results of that query. So now let's look at bringing data in from external sources. So we'll show you how to load external CSV files and have that go directly into a -DB database. So let's select load from desktop. And then I need to select my file. And this is actually some sample data from the World Bank that has information about each country's external debt. So I can select the file, then click on load, and it will show me a preview of the data, the first 10 rows in the file. And again, it's a CSV file that has a heading. The first column is a header column, so the header columns are shown as well as actual data from the first 10 rows. This all looks good. Want to hit next. Then I have to choose the target. So I'm going to create a new table and load it. I'll hit next. This is what the table definition looks like based on the types of data in the CSV file. And I can hit finish. And it will upload the file and load that data into this new table that I created. So my table is called IDS series, which is the same as the file name. It goes into my default schema. It has 215 rows. If I scroll down, I can see it has 100 rows that I can preview right here if I wanted to actually browse the data in the tables. So hopefully this was a helpful introduction into the -DB console. There's a lot more capabilities that you can find out about by consulting the -DB documentation in Bluemix. But here we just wanted to give you a couple of basic operations, creating tables, running queries, and importing CSV data from external sources. Now let's look at managing the SQL Database service in Bluemix. So we'll start by creating an instance of SQL Database. And this is in the data management section. And we'll select the service right here. As with -DB and Cloudant, we can leave it unbound because we're just going to look at the management console. And once it's created, we can go ahead and launch the console. And here is our SQL Database console. So first we want to show you how to work with tables. So we'll select Work with Tables. And now I want to add a table. And like with -DB, it comes up with a default simple table definition. I am going to enhance this. And the reason I'm enhancing this is because unlike -DB, there is no sample data. So in order to show you the capability of browsing existing data, I actually need to create some data. So what I've done here is I've created one row in this table that I'm creating via the wizard. And my DDL has run successfully. So now I can go back, I can select my schema. There's the table I created. And there it is, the table definition, 2 columns. And when I click on Browse Data, as you can see, it shows me the row I inserted. So this is the working with tables area. Very similar to -DB in the sense that you can use it to create tables and you can use it to browse the data in existing tables. So now I want to look at running queries. In the run query option, you can see that it's wizard driven. So I can select my table, so my schema, my table, and my columns. Hit apply, and then it generates the query for me. And if I hit run query, then it runs the query. And I can set the maximum number of rows here if I have a database that has a lot of data and I don't want to overwhelm the tool by bringing in millions of rows. So again, this is how you would go about running a query using this wizard that helps you build the query from scratch. The good news is that you don't really have to be an SQL wizard in order to use this particular tool. So now we'll look at the loading of data. And like DB, you're able to import data from Excel files and CSV files from various sources. So we'll go ahead and use the same CSV file we use for DB. This is some data from the World Bank about each country and their external debt. I'll go ahead and take a look at the file, and it's able to see the various columns and give me a sampling of that data. I hit next. And then, like DB, I get to choose the target. So since I have no matching table, I'll go ahead and create a new one. And here it's just telling me the default values it's using for the table definition. I hit finish, then you see it completes the load. And again, there are 215 rows. This is a preview of the table, so I can take a look at the data. And I've successfully loaded an external CSV file into my SQL database instance. So that's all we have for this video. I wanted to give you a real brief introduction to some of the tools available in Bluemix for managing Cloudant, DB, and SQL database service. So thank you very much. You can consult the Bluemix forums on DeveloperWorks, or you can ask questions on Stack Overflow, or consult the documentation in Bluemix about these tools available to manage the data services. Thank you.